There is nothing worse than untapped potentials. If you know that you're made for more, this is the place. I know that every successful person I've ever met has one thing in common. They do not let themselves fall victim to their circumstances. They figure out a way to rise above it. So join me on this journey where I help you to be better, do better, and have better in life and in business. If you're feeling stuck and you're needing some practical tools, some hope to get you to that better life, this is definitely the place for you. Hey everyone, welcome to the Unstuck podcast. I am your host, Lachelle Weemy, and you guys, today we get a chance to talk to Dina Cooper. You guys, she is a parent coach, and I am going to let you hear all about what it is that she does so that she can inspire you to be a better person, a better parent, and really truly make our world better by loving the people we have at home. So Dina, thank you so much for showing up here, and I'm so glad that you're able to join us.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm dialing in from Sydney, Australia. It's 11 o'clock at night here, and it's just such a joy to be able to join you tonight, Lachelle, because it's or your morning, your
Yes.
morning.
It's so fun that we could connect over, all across the world and to bring people your message. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think the message that we're both sharing is so universal. It is not defined by countries or anything really, is it? It's about the human, and that's a lot of what I've been uncovering for the past decade, I guess, is really focusing on the parent coaching space, because it's been born out of my own pain, my own stuckness, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with your audience tonight.
Well, Dina, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do? Like, what are you passionate about? What lights you up and how you contribute to the world?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, in a nutshell, I'm a parent coach who helps parents with leadership skills. So I know that we touched on that when we spoke earlier, and I'm deeply passionate about this space because I discovered when I became a parent, and then, juggling work and juggling all these different aspects of life, that there were a lot of skills that I didn't have that were leaving me feeling quite stuck, quite frustrated. I was feeling quite resentful, to be honest, of family life and the overwhelm, and just how much we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis as parents. And I just felt such weight, the weight of that, until I started to learn about some of the leadership skills that I now teach, and learn about my mindset and how my mind worked. And there was just so many aspects of leadership that I learned, that it transformed my parenting. And it was never the intention. I actually went to a coach who was helping me with a career change. I was changing from being a chartered accountant to a coach, and it didn't even occur to me that my parenting would transform as much as it did. And so when I went through that transformation as a parent, it became really obvious to me that, hey, if I don't know this, maybe there's other parents that don't know these skills too. And so that started me off. I was one of the first parent coaches in Australia at the time, and it's really just grown from there. And my program is called Parent as Leader, and it's an online program that parents go through to help them build these leadership skills so that they can connect with their child in a way that feels good for them and for the child, and they bring out the best in each other. And that's kind of what we all want, right? We want to enjoy parenting, we want to enjoy family life, but we go in with this vision of it being a certain way, and the reality can be quite different, and we've got to bridge that somehow. And that's a lot of what I help parents do, is to bridge that gap, really be able to have some real resources in place that take away a lot of those daily stresses and the mental load and all of those things, and then be able to create that space to actually enjoy family life.
Right. Oh my gosh. There's so much that I want to unpack with that, you guys. So I literally every single morning, part of my routine is I go back and look at my Facebook memories because it's always fun for me to reminisce. And I literally pulled up a quote that I had posted like 7 years ago. And it said, if you want to change the world, love the people in your home, Mother Teresa. And that has
Mm,
been such a guiding
mm,
principle for me because I am
mm,
someone like you, Dina, that I want to make a big impact in the world. And I think that sometimes we can get caught up into the big impact in our companies, in our businesses, in, the people that read our books, but it's really
yeah.
starting at home. And I think that
Mm.
we underestimate what an impact that could be. And I was literally at a conference 2 days ago where somebody had said, if we had a manual to how to parent, like, would we have bought that? And we all started laughing. We were like, heck yes, we would have, because we wing it. We're winging it, right? And I think that, like, we
Yeah.
fail to consider the fact that, we wing something that is going to make the biggest impact in the world. And I think the two
Yeah.
thoughts coming together just say what a timely conversation this is. And you and I,
Mm.
had talked prior to recording this interview that one of my dreams someday would be to get out the message that the same leadership principles that I learned for business, I wanted to bring into my family and lead my family, because honestly, they're the most
Yeah.
important team I'll ever lead. And so we're
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
nerdy here. We have like a family
We
mission
are, we are.
statement,
We're
and
so geeking out.
we totally did. Like, we have a family mission statement. The kids, like, we have a song. It's so
Yeah.
nerdy. But
Yeah.
it's so paramount that we start to recognize what a difference we can make. And I think that, oftentimes women, we think that we're failing because it's not just a natural thing that we know and do, but we have to
Yeah.
remember that we're in a unique part of history where we're mostly, many of us are working, and we're
Mm.
balancing the more activities that our kids are in. They're not out just riding their bike all day long and come back when the light comes on at night, right? and
That's right.
and so, previous generations, they lived in multi-generational households, or the community was really taxed with helping to raise our children. And so we had
Mm.
mentors built into our family structures that were allowing us to learn from and be mentored by and to be guided by. And we don't have that anymore. And so all of a sudden we're left with this, like, overwhelm of, I have all the things to do, and we feel like we're constantly failing.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
all the things that I just think that what you're doing is literally going to change the world.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think you've nailed it. Like, this is the biggest leadership role of our lives.
Mhm,
And we bring so much shame to feeling like we're failing,
mhm.
when really what we're lacking is some skills, which,
Yeah,
if you've had them passed down, or if you've had mentors around you, or if you've learnt them in another leadership space and you've translated them
yeah,
into your home, you're really lucky and you have those, and they're at your disposal. But if you don't have access to those skills,
right.
and you haven't had, which I didn't, even through my leadership programs, I was a leader in a bank at the time. And, even through the leadership
Yeah,
development programs I did, it still didn't prepare me
no.
for parenting in the way that, learning about, my mindset, self-awareness,
Yes,
listening skills,
yes,
all of these communication skills that are so inherent in a leadership role, where we
right,
don't even bat an eyelid to say, oh, let's go and learn this skill because, I want to grow in this area.
right.
And whenever you ask anyone what's most important to you, the answer is your family.
Mhm.
If you ask somebody that what's more important than home or your work, like most people will say family, right? I don't know anyone that wouldn't say family.
Yeah,
And yet it's not an area that we invest time in on how
right.
we want to set up the family, and how we want to create our mission statements and our family values, and really be able to focus on those things. Because I think one of the things that with this overwhelm is that we're torn in so many different directions. As you said, we've got so many activities now, we've got our own workloads, we've got the technology being 24/7. It's a whole different paradigm for us as parents,
Right.
dealing with the whole technological world, and we're pulled on in all these different directions. And we need the skills to be able to go, right, all of that's happening,
Mhm.
where do I focus? And if you're in a leader in organization, if you're a CEO, if you're a senior leader, you are pulled in multiple directions,
Right.
and you learn the skills of how to focus.
Mhm.
And those are the skills that are so beneficial for us in our homes.
Yes. So, one thing I got to ask you, because there might be people that are listening to this and they're saying, Dina, I totally hear you. Like, I am, I have a job that I use my leadership skills, or maybe even just I have a job that is really, really overwhelming and I come home and I'm overwhelmed. And it sometimes feels
Mm,
like when we get home, it's like that's our safe place to just like let it all go, right? Like where we don't have to
yeah.
be on 24/7, that we kind of need that space. And
Mm,
so I think that as parents, sometimes, even though our family is the most important thing to us, we also allow
mm,
ourselves to let go of all the pressures that we put on ourselves when we leave the house. And it's just like we're
yeah.
giving ourselves that permission to let go. But how do you find that balance in there so that you can give yourself the space to just kind of be, but also
Mm.
always, making sure that you're intentional about the way that you're showing up at home too?
This is a really good question, and the sort of straightforward, simple but not easy answer is playing to your strengths. I do a parent leadership assessment with every parent, and it's it helps you identify what your natural motivations are. What are the motivations that you enjoy? What are the motivations that energize you the most?
Mhm.
So for example, some people are really routine orientated and they love like procedures. And so, if they are more motivated for procedures, then that part of family life and work life just comes naturally to them.
Mhm.
And they're really able to hold those routine spaces, and they're really able to whether it's at work with organizations,
Yeah.
organization of activities, or whether it's at home with organizing routines and knowing where things are and having everything operationalized.
Mhm.
They're really comfortable with that. And often what happens is sometimes that they're not necessarily as flexible with going with the flow, for example. So that's sort of
Right.
the other end of the spectrum of one of these motivation groups. And so, they really struggle with just pausing instead of just going bang, 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 getting through the to-do list, just actually pausing and going, right, I'm just want to enjoy a little bit of time with my child. I'm making dinner, I'm cooking, making, frying the onions, putting in the sauce, and, my child just come and ask, can you come and have a look at this painting, mom? And the flexibility there is about being able to take that break and go and play with them just for a moment, right? But we don't want to be doing what's outside of our natural genius zone too much. And it's becoming aware of, where do we naturally sit and how do we do more of that, versus trying to, and it's also understanding our children's motivations as well, so we can tune into
Yeah.
their motivations, but recognize that if it's not your natural motivation, that you don't have to stay there too long. You might just have to step into it every now and again. So that's where the intentional part comes in, is actually learning about your own motivations first. So most of my program is leading yourself. And then
Yes.
there's the component is the smaller components are actually leading your family, leading your child. So that's the order it goes in.
Yes.
And it's because most of it is about, Lachelle, actually tuning into, what do we need?
Right.
Where's our natural energy from? And where are we tiring ourselves out by doing so? So if I'll give you an example, right?
Yeah.
So I used to be very externally, a motivation called externally referenced.
Mhm.
So what that meant was I held authority outside of myself. So I used to put a whole load of pressure on myself to make sure the house was spotless. People would come over, I'd make sure I'd make loads of dishes, and just make sure then the kitchen was spotless before they entered the house. Would have guests over for dinner.
Yeah.
And so I put all this pressure on myself about how things looked to someone else.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that motivation is actually one of my genius zones, because it helps me to put myself in my client's shoes when I'm a coach. It helps me to put myself in my children's shoes. When I'm talking with them and trying to understand what's going on for them. So that same motivation, whilst it energizes me in some context, can also be my blind spot. And so it actually puts more pressure on me. So
Right.
as I learned to build more internal authority, which is the other end of the spectrum, that's when I started to go, actually, do I feel good cooking this food? How happy am I in my home just the way it is? And I started to understand, actually, how do I feel about this, rather than looking at it from the point of view of what are they going to think when they walk in my home?
Right.
And so this kind of flexibility, where we start to recognize what are our areas that we really that energize us, but where in those motivations may be a potential blind spot for us.
That is so powerful. And I have never really thought about it like that, because when you are pushing yourself outside of your normal, like what comes easy to you, that's when we do get really overwhelmed or really tired, or we feel like we need a break from things, right? And
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
so powerful. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit, because we haven't had a chance to dive into this yet, where you became so passionate about this. Tell me your little background story.
Yeah. Um, it's well, it really started when so I was a chartered accountant, I was in a bank, and I knew that I wanted to move away from chartered accountancy, but I didn't know what to change to. And had I was at an offsite and with the leadership team, and I approached the HR director and I said, look, this is where I'm at, don't know what to do. And he said, look, why don't we get a career coach for you? And he did. And so we had this external career coach come in, and she took me through a whole program. And after that program, she said, you'd be a great coach. Do you want to come and work with me? And so that was my leap and bridge into coaching.
Okay.
And then just shortly after that, my mom got cancer, and I ended up moving away from, I'm in Sydney right now, she lives in the UK. So I ended up moving back to the UK, and took a break, couldn't get a job in coaching for the life of me in London. Everybody was like, you're a chartered accountant, go and do a chartered accountant's role. And I just couldn't break into the coaching market there. And so I did. I returned back to accounting whilst I was in London, had our children over there. And then when I came back to Sydney was when I wanted to pick up this work again, and which is where I started to study more about coaching. I started to delve more into, how could I transition this career change?
Yeah.
And I shared before earlier how I went to see this other coach, and as a result of that, I was then transformed as a parent. And the skills that I learned during that time of studying coaching and learning through this program of coaching set me off on this trajectory. And I started to really learn about our mindset is one facet, right? And depending on how we feel and what we think, allows what we want to come through us to come through, right? And so, I personally believe in a higher self or a universal, something. I believe that we're all come into this world to do something.
Mhm.
And, we each have our unique expression of what that something is. And so with that in mind, I took what I learned about developing mindset and helping develop emotional intelligence and resilience, and that developing that courage in my
Yeah.
children,
Yeah.
but without needing to shape who they were, without needing to shape what was coming through them.
Right.
And so this is my experiment ground, right? So, this is 11 years ago, and my children were 2 and 4. They're now 13 and 15. And it has been the most incredible ride, because I've had to, so on that journey of starting to put myself out there, create a business, I started to learn how I actually suffered very severely from anxiety and depression, and I never acknowledged that in my life. And then, there were all sorts of situations that I got myself into because I had such low self-esteem as a teenager, as a child. I started to recognize how much I didn't have anybody that truly understood me as a child. And so I had all these gifts and talents, and I'm highly intuitive and highly empathic, and I had all these gifts and abilities, but I never had anyone to say, hey, Dina, you're really good at caring for people. You really have this deep heart, this deep loving heart. And, the way you care about people is, really different to how other people care, And no, I didn't have that kind of feedback. So there were all these aspects of myself that I've been having to to really unearth who I am. And so as I've been doing that, the same thoughts run through my mind because I'm a problem solver. And so my problem solving as a child came out as my parents would think I'd be really negative all the time. And so I got labeled negative. And so, but just a genius problem solver. And so my problem solving mind just went to, how am I going to prevent all this for my kids? Like, I do not want my kids growing up with all the, am I allowed to swear on your podcast, Michelle? Yeah. I don't want them to grow up with all the stuff that I've had to unlearn. How do I do this? How do I do this? And so that has been my driver and my passion and the question that I ask myself every single day about, how can I show up for these kids so that I let them be them. And one of the key messages in Parent as Leader is lead them to be them. And it's just what I'm deeply passionate about, because I've seen it now with my children, where, they step into things really easily, like they're learning at a rapid pace. And it's not because they are studying and we didn't do any homework during primary school. We didn't focus on, all I focused on quite literally is building their mindset, building their resilience, and building their courage. And I've literally not focused on anything academic or anything else. All I've done is follow their energy on that. And so through that, today, one of my sons is got access to auditioned and got into a drama performing arts school for high school, and my other son got into a selective school because he's just really good at analytics and maths, and so they're playing to their natural strengths. And I can't tell you, and it's just as similar to what we've just talked about earlier. When you play to your natural strengths, it gives you energy. It doesn't take it away.
Right.
So, when we talk about motivating our kids, we shouldn't need to motivate our kids to do anything. We want to build their intrinsic motivation to contribute, to, be a part of the family, to follow, be them, and feel enough in being them. Right. Fundamentally, that's the answer is really simple in terms of what our job is as parents, in my opinion. It's our job is to help our children to love and accept themselves. That's it.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
If we can do that, but it's the most complex thing, because we get triggered, we get caught up because we've got work and we've got all these other priorities and we've got all these other things going on, and so it's not easy, but it is simple.
Well, and I think that it's so beautiful what your mission is, and I also love how you integrate resilience and courage into the formula, because I think that so often we can get really lopsided into, building up our kids, love and acceptance so much that they fail to consider how they can contribute to society, right? Because we can also get on the path of entitlement, and like you are it's so special that you don't have to follow, the rules of the universe and the world. And I just love how you
Mm,
have such a beautiful way to look at it. Like, I want them to be themselves, but I also want them to be courageous and have resilience and be able to know that life is hard sometimes, and how they can
mm,
find it within themselves to overcome the things that are going to be brought into this world. And I think that one of the motivating factors for me is I want to raise really good human beings, right?
yeah.
Like, I want to raise an independent, strong human being. And
Yeah.
sometimes that, takes that really, really intentional motivation to really drive in the resilience and the grit and the things that the overcoming that happens, because, right? Like, that's how we raise really independent
Does.
people. So
Yeah,
how do
it
you
does. It does. It is intentional, but it's also important, I think, to recognize that it doesn't have to be perfect,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
Like, this is the thing that we try, I know I've certainly had to overcome perfectionism, in my own life and,
Yes.
which translated into parenting. And we don't need to be perfect at this. It's kind of like the 80-20 rule, like
Yes.
we just want to do it, as much as we can. We want to be intentional. But hey, if you have an off day and you get triggered by your child and you yell, or you know, it's okay. Like, you got triggered and you just own it. And,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you let, it's just a healthy human reaction in my view. And so, I had this the other day. My teen really, we were really triggering each other. And all I did was, and I don't often do this, but, I was really triggered, and I I couldn't figure out how I wanted to handle it. So that night I went to bed, I hadn't handled it. And, I thought, you know what, I'm okay with this, because this doesn't happen very often. It's probably happened maybe once before, if that. And I thought, I just don't know how to handle this right now. So I'm gonna leave it be. And in the morning, he was up at breakfast, and he got up before me, and I went downstairs and we said good morning. And I said, yeah, we're both annoying each other right now. We're both really wanting different things right now, aren't we? And it was just, all I did was acknowledge that that's what was going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And it just helped dissolve the whole situation. Like, from there, he was like, you know we were both, huggy, and just back to our loving selves. But sometimes I think we've got to really acknowledge parenting is a mirror. And sometimes we get triggered into situations, and we need a lot of self-compassion, and that's not always easy when you haven't been trained, or you
Right.
haven't been modeled, or you haven't been parented with self-compassion, to
That is
develop self-compassion.
so, so powerful, because I think that oftentimes, at least myself, I'm a perfectionist. Like, you and I have so much in common, like personality wise, it's insane. So I'm just like, okay, you're my sister from across the world for sure. And I
Mhm.
think that I, put myself in such a high, expectation of things, that I want everything to go just right. But I also have to recognize, right, that there's so many other influences that go on inside of our kids' lives, and we can't control everything that happens. We can try our best. And I love that 80%, right? Because there's going to be times where we don't get it right. And it's
Mm,
okay. If we're trying our best. And I have to remind
mm,
myself, like, I did the best I could at the time, knowing what I knew at the time. Right.
yeah,
And so just
absolutely.
remembering that, but I
Yeah.
also am such a big fan of better. Like, I always want to be better tomorrow than I was today. And so I think that all of the things that you talked about can give us tools. I would love just to
Mm.
hear, like, what would you say is one of the top things that people really struggle with, that you work with, and how could you perhaps give us some advice on how to handle that?
I think probably the top thing is actually just diffusing what's going on for us
Okay.
in the moment.
Okay.
And we can be triggered, but I think, so, like, me the other night, as I was triggered,
Mhm.
even though I was triggered, I was able to utilize a skill which I teach. It's called the emotion diffuser. And it allows me to just accept how I'm feeling in the moment and not need to react. So I'm still acknowledging how I feel, because I think there's a really subtle distinction, but it's a really important one to make.
Yeah.
And it's around the self-compassion, it's around the self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
We really want to acknowledge how we're feeling and not bury it down.
Yes. Yes.
Because you know, as you would know, and you know, we know as we go on these journeys to get unstuck, is that emotions are stored in our body and they get triggered. And so we don't, sometimes we're not consciously aware of what is triggering that or what's been triggered. And when we don't have a skill to be able to create a space before we respond, that's when we can say things that could be, we regret, that could be damaging, that could be, and I think for me, that's the most important skill.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, we can talk through it. We can talk through how
I would
to
love
cultivate.
that. I would love
Yeah.
that, because I think a lot of people don't realize, and this, I'm just going to make this real quick point, guys, that if you are maybe unaware of what a trigger is, to me, and I would love for you to expand on this, but for me, it's when I have an exaggerated emotional response to something that in someone else might not cause as much of a big emotional response to it. And so that's how I know that, okay, something is being triggered in me. And like she said, like energetically, those emotions do get stored in our body. And when they get triggered, essentially is why we intense, air quotes, overreact to something that somebody else might not think is as big of a deal. Right? Am I right?
Yeah. I'd make a slight, you've
Yeah.
nailed it for the most part, but I'd make a slight nuance change in that, is that it's not really about how somebody else might perceive that.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't make that comparison personally.
Yeah.
And the reason we wouldn't make that comparison is because how you feel is how you feel.
Right. Right.
So even if somebody else doesn't feel that way,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
it's still how you feel,
Yes,
right?
still how you feel.
So
That is
it's the
perfect.
distinction that I would make. It's
Yeah.
when the feeling fogs your brain so much that you can't think
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah.
So when your mind is clear, but you're feeling an emotion, that's likely going to be a pure emotion versus a triggered emotion. And so emotions in general are just feedback, right? They tell us, hey, something's in line for me right now, something's not aligning for me right now. And that's what emotions tell us. And so we've got to listen to that. But the way that we distinguish whether it's a trigger or whether it's just something that we're feeling and we're just, you know, here to feel it is, for me anyway, it's the brain fog. It might present differently for other people. But it's like, I cannot, when I'm triggered into an emotion, I cannot think. Like the other night, I could not think, I couldn't even figure out, I didn't even have the energy to figure out how I was going to deal with this situation in that moment. And so all I did was what I'm about to share with you.
Yes.
And that was, and that just helped me to just you know, acknowledge the emotion, but just sit with it and be okay with sitting with it.
Yes. I would love for you. Take us through
Yeah.
this practice for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's called, I call it the emotion diffuser. So let's say that something happens and you have, you feel something about it. So do you have something? Can I ask you, would you like to do this with me?
Sure. I would be happy to. Yes.
Okay, so you give me a situation where you've had an emotion, say about a 5 or 6 out of 10 emotion about it.
Okay. And you want me to tell you about it? Like, what do you want me to
Yeah,
tell you about it?
just a very brief
So when there's someone in my
event that
yeah,
happened.
yep. So yes, I have an event. It was a phone call that was really hard, and somebody that I cared about said some really harsh things. And
Great.
every time I
Okay, so
think
we've
about this
just
person,
paused
I think of
there.
them. Yeah. Yep.
Great. So somebody, you're on a phone call and somebody said some really harsh things,
Mhm. Yes.
right? So what was your immediate thought about somebody saying something harsh?
So my initial thought when this person said these things was that it was just like hurtful to the core and that there was something wrong with me. That
Yeah, yeah.
yes, like I
Hurtful to
was
the
in
core.
that,
There's something wrong with me.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so what was the feeling that went with this is hurtful to the core?
That that I am unworthy of being loved just the way I am.
Hmm. So that's a thought. So that's a thought that went
Okay.
through your mind. I'm
Okay.
unworthy of
Okay.
of being just
Okay.
who I am. So feeling could be
Oh,
I feel annoyed about that, or I feel sad about that, or I
I was
feel
hurt. Like I was really hurt.
yeah, I feel hurt about
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, and then what was the feeling that went with and then when you had the thought of, I'm not worthy just as I am, what
Mhm.
was the feeling that went with that? So that was the next thought.
Just sad. Sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it goes hurt, then sad. And so we go through a thought and a feeling, a thought and a feeling, and a thought and a feeling, and a thought and a feeling. And all of that happens. And we didn't by any means get to the top thought or the top emotion just
Yeah.
then, the top feeling. But we do all of that in an eighth of a second,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
it happens just instantaneously in the moment. So the antidote to that is going, hey, somebody said something hurtful,
Mhm.
and what was the initial feeling when the thought of somebody saying something hurtful or recognizing that somebody said something hurtful? What was the initial feeling?
Um, hurt.
Was it hurt in that moment as well?
And
So when
I
hurt,
was probably like the moment, it was probably anger.
yeah, anger.
Mhm.
So let's go with the anger. So, I feel angry about that. Now, it's okay to feel angry about that. Somebody's just said something hurtful,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's going, you know what? That's how I feel. It's okay. I don't like it, but it is what it is. And it's bringing acceptance to that feeling
Mhm.
and the fact that it's happened. And being able to, and we obviously haven't got time to do it today, but I help parents embody that
Yeah.
acceptance as part of the emotion diffuser, because that's what enables us to go to stop at that layer of
Mhm.
I am feeling angry right now,
Okay.
and it stops that escalation process, and that's what stops us from getting into the
Mhm.
the part where we're going into what I would call our wounds, like something's been triggered in us, and
Mhm.
you know obviously at some point, if it keeps re-triggering, there's something to look at there, and that's something that we can work through.
Mhm.
And in that moment, it's not, you haven't
Yeah.
possibly got the space or the energy or the time to be able to work on it in
Right.
that moment. So
Right.
being able to have that skill really puts us in that frame of mind. That and it's Viktor Frankl who said, in that moment,
Yeah.
that silence in between is where our freedom lies, right? And that's exactly what it is. It gives us that pause to make that intentional choice.
Oh my goodness. I could talk to you all day long. I know that you probably are like, "Oh my goodness, it's time for bed," right? But I am so
I'm
grateful for
good.
this.
I'm
Like
good.
this is just like a tiny little piece of the iceberg, you guys. And just to summarize, like I feel like it's so important that when we start to recognize how important self-leadership is, the emotional intelligence, the awareness, the things that allow us to become the best versions of ourselves. Not only do we get to
Mm,
model that for our kids, but we get a chance to help them navigate their crazy, life that they're going through with all the emotions and all of the hormones and all of the things that happen to them, that we can walk alongside of them. But it starts with really trying to dive into who we are and how we can become the best versions of ourselves first. And I just,
yeah.
oh my goodness, I just thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us. One of the things that I always do to wrap up our conversations is make sure that, number one, is there anything else that you wanted to really make sure to mention before we pop off the phone or the call?
No, just if anybody wants to explore this further, to go to parentasleader.com and take the quiz so they can learn about their leadership style.
So fun. And so we will make sure you guys have all the access to Dina inside the show notes so that you can get that quiz, so that we can give you all of her social handles, everything that you need to follow her journey and to get in touch with her if you want to. She's such a gift. And one of the other things that I always do before we wrap up is I ask you guys to give me a question that you would love the audience to think about or ponder that's going to help move them from where they are to where they want to be.
Good question. Um, I'd always ask a parent to really understand how they want to feel. We get caught up in what we want to do and how we want to do it and how we want to create it.
Yeah.
But I think a real key to creating a life we want and really deserve is tuning into how do you want to feel in that life, because the feeling can be accessed in so many different ways, and it just opens up so much possibility.
Oh my
So
gosh,
how do
I
you want
love
to
that.
feel?
I love that. That is so beautiful. How do you want to feel, you guys? I can go into just that one thing for another hour with you, but I have to control myself here. So, you guys, make sure that if you haven't already, hit subscribe, leave a review, let Dina know how much this conversation meant to you and how much you just are feeling led to be unstuck by her conversation. We also want to make sure that if you haven't already, take a quick screenshot, post this in your stories, let people know that you're tuning into the Unstuck podcast so we can get the word out about Dina and all the amazing things that we're doing here. And I am so grateful for all of you guys to show up here week after week. And I just want to say thank you for being part of the Unstuck tribe. Everybody have a great week and thanks for listening. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to the Untucked podcast. I am so grateful to be on this journey with you. And don't forget to check out the show notes if you want to get into my private club, the Better Club, to be able to learn better ways to be better, do better, and have better. So until next time, keep showing up. Let's get unstuck together. Have a great day.